this is actually the first time in history that a virus has been designated as a qualified disaster. So this declaration for our entire state, all 100 counties, allowed small businesses throughout the state to be eligible for the relief efforts that were to come. This morning, we're going to talk about two significant initiatives, and I do also want to mention a third that some of you may also be familiar with, and that's the small business debt relief. But the initial response by SBA was the operation of the economic injury disaster loan. As Pat mentioned as well, the CARES Act was passed on March the 27th. We'll talk extensively this morning about the Paycheck Protection Program. But just very briefly about the Small Business Debt Relief Program, it also was a part of the CARES Act, and it provides $17 billion for small businesses that are existing SBA loan holders. This initiative will provide 6 months of payments for small businesses for their either 7A, Community Advantage, or 504 loan. So as a part of the CARES Act, small business debt relief is specifically focused for existing SBA borrowers. The Paycheck Protection Program is a $349 billion program that is designed to ensure that small businesses retain their employees. The program was passed on March the 27th as a part of the CARES Act. And let's talk about a few of the key components of the Paycheck Protection Program. The overall maximum amount of loan for a Paycheck Protection Program loan is $10 million. The terms can be up to 2 years with a 1% interest. But the key component of the Paycheck Protection Program that was a part of the CARES Act is that it has a forgivable clause. If the small business or nonprofit, and we recently received clarity that also faith organizations are eligible for the Paycheck Protection Program. If that entity maintains their staffing level, or more importantly, dedicates proceeds to payroll after the first 8 weeks after receiving the loan, and in addition pays utilities, lease payments, or mortgages, that portion of the loan would become forgivable. Because of the limited amount of funds, the SBA's direction has been, if you spend at least 75% of those initial proceeds during that following 8-week period, you can spend up to 25% on utilities, lease payments, mortgages. That combined expenditure would then be deducted from the full amount of the loan. So clearly designed to encourage small businesses to maintain their employees, to keep individuals employed, and also providing a benefit for them to address some of their other operating needs. The Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program was launched on March the 18th, as I mentioned, immediately following North Carolina's declaration as a disaster. These economic injury disaster loans, or you may hear EIDL, were enhanced once the CARES Act was passed, and there is now a grant component to it. It's called an Emergency Economic Injury Advance. The overall economic injury disaster loans can be up to $2 million for a term of 30 years. For small businesses, the rate is 3.75%. For nonprofits, it's 2.75%. And this is the full potential for the economic injury disaster loans. However, during the course of applying for these loans, the borrower or potential borrower can elect to be considered for an emergency advance. This advance can be up to $10 million. I'm sorry, not $10 million, $10,000, up to $10,000. And once reviewed and approved, these funds are distributed within 3 days. So this provides the small business some immediate economic support while they go through the economic injury loan process. Again, these loan proceeds may be utilized for general operating expense, which can include payroll, accounts payable, fixed costs that the business is experiencing. These loans are direct with SBA, and we'll speak in just a moment on how to apply to the economic injury disaster loans. In comparison to the Paycheck Protection Program, those loans are through local lenders, whether it's a local bank or a credit union. That's designed to add additional capacity to SBA's loaning capabilities. So the economic injury disaster loans is a direct application to SBA. The Paycheck Protection Program utilizes lenders within existing communities to provide a broader base of support for potential borrowers to access. The question on how to apply and what we are encouraging now at SBA is to visit the main website that lists all these initiatives, because there could be benefits for these loans, and you're not precluded from applying for an injury disaster loan and also now a Paycheck Protection Program loan. So I encourage all small businesses, nonprofits to go to sba.gov/coronavirus. That's sba.gov/coronavirus. And there you will find all the potential opportunities for small businesses. In addition to the lending community supporting SBA with the Paycheck Protection Program, we also have numerous partners throughout North Carolina that may assist small businesses. Many of you are familiar with and work with our small business and technology and development centers. They're located at our universities throughout North Carolina. Clearly, we are all working in a virtual environment now, but they're still available to work one-on-one with small businesses and nonprofits to prepare them to apply for either or all of these initiatives. We have 4 women business centers across North Carolina: Asheville, Charlotte, Raleigh and Durham, and Fayetteville. We have a Veterans Business Opportunity Center in Fayetteville as well to assist our veterans. So not only can small businesses or nonprofits work directly with SBA on several of these initiatives, along with the lending community, we have partners throughout, resource partners throughout the state that are available to assist these businesses. So in closure, because I would like to provide ample opportunity for question and answer, because there's a lot of information, a lot of changing happening, but want to just make clear that the 2 initial recovery efforts, along with the potential debt relief for existing SBA loan holders, would be the economic injury disaster loan with its accompanying advance grant, and also the Paycheck Protection Program. I want to make it clear also that SBA, as I mentioned earlier, realizes the importance of small business in North Carolina's economy, not only from an economic sense, but the impact that they make on our communities. And we will continue to work hand in hand, not only with small businesses, but with organizations like the North Carolina Economic Developers Association. We think it's very important to partner with all the stakeholders as North Carolina moves forward to not only stabilize, but grow and sustain itself after this tragic pandemic. Final slide is just contact information. If you need to follow up with me, our main office is located here in Charlotte, but we also have representatives in Asheville, Raleigh, and in Wilmington that can be an assistance to you as well. So with that, I'll conclude my formal remarks and certainly look forward to the question and answer session.
Thank you so much, Thomas. We've got a couple of questions. I'll just kind of read them aloud in the order that I get them, and then we can get some answers. So the first question, what should we do if we can get no guidance from our local lender?
I would, and when you say guidance, do they mean on the Paycheck Protection Program specifically, how to apply those type things?
Yes.
Yes. I would suggest you can not only contact SBA, and I'll give that number as well. It's 1-800-659-2955, 1-800-659-2955. So you could certainly talk to SBA Direct, although the loan process will be with your local lender. I would suggest talking with SBA or utilizing one of our many resource partners throughout North Carolina. As I mentioned earlier, you have the SBTDC, Women's Business Centers, the Veteran Business Centers are available to assist small business owners and nonprofits.
Thank you. Our next is from Sarah. For business owners with multiple businesses, can they apply multiple times for the EIDL and PPP for each business?
Each business would need to apply individually for an EIDL or a PPP. You can qualify and potentially be granted both loans. The proceeds from those loans would have to be for different purposes. As an example, if you were going to expend an EIDL loan for payroll, you couldn't use those same payroll numbers for the compliance with the Payroll Protection Act if you were trying payroll protection program if you were trying to have loan relief or forgiveness. So you could apply individually for your business, various businesses to each of those programs, but not have duplication and use of funds.
Our next question is from Adria. Can the SBA consider bringing back a lock doc or even no doc loan application process for independents, like gig economy workers, independent contractors? Many of these business owners do not have quick access to the documentation necessary under regular application processes.
Both processes have been streamlined. I'm not aware of any additional guidance that we will have a reduction of the documents required, but I know with the economic injury disaster loan, there are just basic financial information required. For the Paycheck Protection Program, again, a very streamlined application process. So at this point, and things are evolving, at this point, the streamlined process is what will be implemented.
Our next question is from Tommy Jenkins. Concerning the Paycheck Protection Program, if a business partner receives guaranteed payment for services as reported on a K-1, may said payment be included as payroll costs on the company's application, or is it possible that the recipient may themselves be eligible for a PPP loan?
I know, and on that specific question, I will give the general response is individuals, sole proprietors and what have you are eligible. You may have to work with your accountant. It sounds like in that scenario to, as you work with your lender, to clarify their specific compensation, but owners are eligible.
All right. Any other questions from anybody? I think the NCEDA team thought of one.
All right.
The PPP is designed to help small businesses that were established prior to the onset of COVID-19. But what programs does SBA have that can support entrepreneurs who may have an idea right now on starting up a new business?
Well, there are the existing SBA initiatives. Our flagships are 7A and 504. So with this initial response, the questioner is correct. There aren't specific funds for startups, but I would suggest looking at our existing SBA portfolio if you are a startup, because there are existing loan products that could be of benefit.
Great. From Todd, is there still money left in the programs? I read an article in the Washington Post that reported there were more applications than money available. Is there a push for additional legislative action to add more money to these programs?
I'll start from the latter part of that question. And literally on yesterday, there is discussion in Washington about additional appropriations. As we all know, we have to see how the legislative process ends up. but the PPP in particular was funded at $349 billion. The discussions yesterday were already considering adding another $250 billion, but that is still would have to be negotiated through the congressional process. So at this point, I would still, and I don't know if the questioner has applied, encourage individuals to continue to apply to the existing two programs, because there just is not a guaranteed program. If you apply, you will receive the loan. So I think while there is some significant response and demand, I would consider continuing to apply.
This question's from Greg. If the PPP is forgivable, does it still get taxed?
Not the forgivable portion. It is not considered income, that forgivable portion.
The next question is from John. We use a professional employment organization to handle payroll and workers' comp insurance. As a result, we don't file 941 or do W-3s as the PEO does this. Our bank seems to be stemmed by this. Who at SBA do we get guidance from our bank? Who at SBA do we get guidance from for our bank in this situation?
I would utilize the number that I mentioned earlier, your resource, but it would be the same cadre that could provide support. The banks are, and specifically this program launched not quite a week ago. So there is still guidance being given, but the banks do have significant guidance already on a national level. There is already $100 billion worth of loans that have been secured, not all obviously distributed yet. So there is guidance on how to proceed to our lending community. So I would, if you're not getting the answers from the lenders, then I would seek information from SBA, the number that I've given, or one of our resource partners throughout the state.
Is there any interest charge on the PPL loan, even if the loan is forgivable?
On the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, there is a 1% interest, but not, and it seems like the caller says even on the forgiven portion. The forgiven portion, the request for forgiving would happen right after the 8-week period. So the short answer would be no, because also on the PPP, there's a 6-month deferment on any payment. So if you're going to apply for the reduction in the loan amount or the forgivable portion, you would do that before the 6 months period before the 6-month period was over. You would do that at the end of the first 8 weeks. And then any portion that is not forgiven would be amortized at that 2-year 1% rate.
Thank you. What specific advice can you offer North Carolina's economic development practitioners about how they can better serve and support small businesses in their communities?
I think at this stage in the recovery process is exactly what you're doing today, to seek as much information on the availability of initiatives, not only from SBA, but other avenues, and sharing that, giving accurate information. And there are still some questions that are not answered and we are trying to be, at SBA, being very diligent of not filling in the blanks, but providing the information we have and making it clear that additional guidance will be coming. So I think your organization is doing the right thing by gathering as much current information and continuing to monitor the environment, because things literally are changing on a daily basis. In particular with the CARES Act, obviously Congress is reviewing how that is moving forward. That's why we had within the last 24 hours, because of what they're already seeing with the success of the Paycheck Protection Program. And given there have been challenges in the initial implementation, but we can already see that as being beneficial to the small business community. And there's already discussion on expansion of that. So staying informed, seeking up-to-date information and sharing that within your various communities is going to be extremely important.
Thank you. Who determines if the PPP funds are forgivable, SBA or the lender?
The lender has the responsibility to assess the payroll information. If you've used it also for utilities or rent payments, the lender will determine that at the time the loanee makes that claim for forgiveness.
Any other questions from anyone? Remember, you can type it in the Q&A box or raise your hand. All right, well, if we don't have any other questions, I think we can probably close it out. It's a little earlier than expected. Thomas, do you have any last things you wanted to make sure are on our radar?
I would just like to once again thank NCEDA for your commitment to our small business environment in particular. We look forward to continuing our relationship and building upon it. I would, as I mentioned, strongly suggest that small businesses seek out the various initiatives from SBA. I will repeat again, a key site to go to see all of the information we discussed today is sba.gov/coronavirus, sba.gov/coronavirus, and to pursue the initiatives that are available now. As I mentioned, because of the significant impact that small businesses make on our economy here in North Carolina, it's critical for our small businesses to take advantage of these economic support mechanisms that are available now. And thank you, and we'll welcome the opportunity to come back at any time to provide additional information.
Thank you so much. Well, on behalf of NCEDA, thank you, Mr. Stith, for joining us this morning. The information you've shared today will enable our members to add value for small businesses in their communities. Making timely connections to SBA programs like the PPP could determine whether a small business goes on to survive after the pandemic or close its doors for good. So this is important information, and we thank you for joining us today and for your leadership at SBA during this challenging time. I'd also like to thank our members. We appreciate your participation in today's webinar. We welcome your feedback about this offering and all of our professional development programs. Don't forget that next week, NCEDA will host another important webinar. It will feature U.S. Senator Thom Tillis, who will discuss the CARES Act and other federal action that is relevant to North Carolina's economy as it emerges from this crisis. That webinar will take place exactly 1 week from today, Thursday, April 16th at 9 a.m. The registration link can be found on our website, www.nceda.org, under the Networking Luncheons and Webinars section. In the meantime, stay connected, stay home, and stay well. Thank you, everyone.